Well, it looks like I'm continuing this business about the LDS General Conference, mind control, Freemasonry, etc. So this is number 2, and I'm doing this another way here due to some technical issues. So I'm improvising. So this is going live up to YouTube, and I will just start off from the editing software where I left off, about 20 seconds prior to where I left off. It's not perfect. It's going to be a little bit fast for a while. Just got some issues, and so dealing with it. So put up with the speed a little bit, and it'll hopefully normalize here in just a little bit. Some of this was a tad bit redundant, but I think there's a fair amount of good stuff in this video. Thank you.
Messengers, including God the Father and Jesus Christ, as the story went, to see him and begin to usher in the dispensation of the fullness of times, in which the priesthood authority would be restored, revelation, we'd know all the things that we needed to know, and so forth. And as we studied these things, the view of the LDS Church has a special role in the projected history of the United States in prophecy. So we learned that the Constitution would hang by a thread, but that the LDS Church, the elders of the Church, would be found basically holding up the constitutional principles, and that by divine intervention, accompanying great faith exercised by faithful members of the Church, the Lord would preserve the nation from utter destruction and utter domination by totalitarian forces, which the Book of Mormon essentially prophesied or predicted would gain significant amounts of control over the United States and the world, and only through God's intervention and the faithfulness of the saints would this bastion of freedom narrowly be preserved and help usher in the millennium by preparing the people to meet the Christ and establishing Zion in Jackson County, Missouri, and having the lost 10 tribes come down from the land of the north and join the people in Zion. So this history in advance business that was projected through various prophecies of Joseph Smith, many that are not necessarily canonized, in addition to the Book of Mormon, had an effect on many people in the church, I'm sure. And so our view was that God set up America, as I have just stated, as a bastion of freedom, and the Doctrine and Covenants is in section 100, 101, or 100 or 101, I think it's verse 29. And it says that the Constitution was established. God raised up wise men to establish the Constitution of the United States. So it does this, and it's, thinking about redressing the, wrongs done to the saints in Missouri, I believe. I think it's section 100. So when we wake up, it's because we notice that things are wrong. So we notice that things were wrong. We had these wars with, World War I, World War II, things just weren't right, Lusitania being sunk, the attack on Pearl Harbor allowed to occur when there were so many warning signs, and, all the manipulations going in the United States into these things, and the things that have happened. So I'm not going to get too deep into that sort of thing, but we learned how the media was basically controlled by certain people with strong financial interests, and a certain group called the Council on Foreign Relations, which I think now has about 4,000 members, was set up, and was a very integral part of this secret combination, you might say, that was engineering the shift to a totalitarian government and preparation for a merger with other countries into a world government under the United Nations. So we learned a lot of factual information, and we also learned how the media was manipulated and tactics that they used, and certain labeling and creating loaded terms and using them so they could say, conspiracy theory or those sort of things that cast doubt on people. McCarthyism, when the Reese Committee or the Committee on Investigating Un-American Activities and so forth found all sorts of communist cells operating in the United States. The media was employed to denigrate, people that were seeking to protect the Constitution from subversive groups. They were denigrated in the media a lot. So anyway, I learned more about secretive societies and secret societies within the secretive societies. One book I read was called Proofs of Conspiracy. It was written a long, long time ago. Was it Robinson? Yeah. Anyway, and it dealt with certain secret societies and so forth. And it seems that Freemasonry was very much involved with what was going on in this respect, and seemed to be a meeting ground for more secret, for absolutely secret societies within Freemasonry. And it was like the carrier for other societies, secret combinations. Anyway, I noticed that things weren't always quite lining up with what I was told. First, they weren't lining up with what you're told in textbooks, because of the influence over the media and the educational system. And then I learned about behavioral control, coercive persuasion, group mind control tactics used by media and other sensitivity training, neurolinguistic programming, hypnotic language, a lot of different things that I learned about studying psychological techniques that are used for various means. Some just for people trying to be successful in life without necessarily trying to manipulate others for anything wrong, but just learning communication skills in conjunction with all these things. I learned a lot. And then I started seeing things that seemed out of place. And because of my walk in life, I ran into Freemason.
Although I was never a Freemason, I certainly have studied some things, and reading in Morals and Dogma, I guess that's the short name for Albert Pike's masterpiece, he talks about the pure Luciferian doctrine, as does Manly P. Hall, and harnessing the seething energies of Lucifer. Now, both Pike and Hall are well known as 33rd degree Freemasons, heavy-duty occultists, and lauded with multiple additional honors upon the 33rd degree, such as the head of the Supreme Council and so on and so forth for Pike. And when we see these things, harnessing the seething energies of Lucifer as a goal for all Master Masons set forth by Pike, that's a concern when you start looking at Joseph Smith joining the Freemasons. So when you start noticing occult symbols like, the Eye of Horus, All-Seeing Eye, like in the St. George, Assembly Hall, and then you're going to see the Eye of Horus, and I think this one's like Salt Lake, and you see the Nauvoo here, you got the pentagrams, inverted pentagrams here on the temple with the sunstone, all this occult stuff. And we see multiple inverted pentagrams in the Salt Lake Temple Square area. So when you first see this stuff, if you know what you're looking for, if you recognize it, it's the shocker. So when you're familiar with occult symbolism, you can see it all over the place. And when it's in the wrong place, that's an area of concern. Now, there have been some folks that have brought attention to it in the Salt Lake, Temple Square area.
And there's always an excuse. Oh, well, that was Anton's, they popularized that. It was always a good symbol before, but these things are ancient. It's like the hexagram, the six-sided, but you learn about, here's the magical stuff. And there were things that weren't right. The Jupiter Talisman, the Dorothy Joseph Smith, the 15 spires on every bigger spire. Anyway, there were things, and you look, and you see all these leaders of religion are all cultists, Why? Okay, like I said, there's a Jupiter Talisman, a magical talisman that Joseph Smith buried with him and had when he died. And there's Ellen Gould White from SDA, and she was involved with the occultists, like Theosophy, Blavatsky, and all those people that you learn about Lucifer tries to. And, Charles Taze Russell, starting the Jehovah's Witnesses, and then everybody likes to talk about Joseph Smith, in Freemasonry. And they talk about the sublime degree. Well, that's also associated with just a Master Mason, I think. But here you got the obelisk, they got that, Russell's got the pyramid, White's got the all these people, Billy Graham, Oral Roberts, all these people. And there's Charles Taze Russell, Jehovah's Witnesses, heavy-duty occultists, high-degree Freemason, and all stuff. And we just see these occult things. Here we go. There's Robert Schuller on the right. Just look at Gorbachev and look what they're doing there. All these guys. There's the Queen. Check it out. And you say, what? We got the Eye of Horus. Well, we got all these occult things going on here. What are these guys doing? Look at what they're doing in front of here. Okay, so you see several leaders in politics and religion, and they're all doing things that don't look right. So this is what's on Scowcroft. There's Bush. Dan Quayle throwing the horns, just like Bush, and just like Cheney, and then now here's Cheney, and Hinckley, and check out the handshake. What's going on here? These are these things you look and go, wait, what the heck? Now, wait a minute. Here's Monson and Bush, and wait a minute, check this out. What's going on here? Well, what's Obama doing? Well, these guys are involved with the secret combinations. If the Book of Mormon tells us that's really the case. If you believe the Book of Mormon, for any reason, you may not be, you may be somebody who believes that Joseph Smith's a prophet. You may not be. There's Bill Clinton.
Now, the idea is to make this clear what's going on. That's a satanic salute. They call it the horns. There's Hillary doing it. You see this at rock concerts where there's Satanism involved. There's Hillary again with the casual move with Obama. There's Obama doing it. Got all these presidents doing it. There's Bush. Bush again. Bush again. Bush again. Bush's whole family throws the satanic horns. There's his daughter. Now we're going to see his wife. Couple shots there. We don't have George Sr. Satanic salute at the Schwarzenegger-Kennedy marriage. And then we got Schuller and Gorbachev. And the Queen. Dan Quayle Donald Trump and Lucifer on his left. There's the Eye of Horus. You see, things have been popularized in our culture that have been used in Satanism. The goat's head on the right and the Nero cross on the left, both called the peace sign in popular culture or the victory sign. But we see these things working our way into our culture, satanic symbols that have been used for eons, possibly, for a very long time. You see the shadow of the goat's head there. So why are these things popularized in our society? You have to ask yourself these questions. There's Barack throwing the horns. There's his wife, Michelle, doing it. And then here's Michelle again, and now doing the Illuminati triangle there. And there, look at this grip there that we had with Gorbachev. Oh, did I miss? Again, they're not all Longhorns fans, people. Trump and Quayle. And there's the Prince. Okay, Obama again. More Obama-ism. There's Obama. So they're all flashing these satanic salutes. Now here's Michelle Obama. Check her left hand out. It's kind of hiding underneath there, and then we got the blow up underneath Barack of her hand to make it easier seen. She's doing that for a magazine cover, Vogue magazine. Now we got her on Ebony. And you can see she's doing the Illuminati triangle there. She's doing it again here for Reader's Digest. You know, this isn't by accident. Look at the Prince. These people are in a satanic organization, or groups of satanic organizations, these secret societies, okay? It should be pretty obvious. We've seen Presidents Reagan, Clinton, Clinton's wife, Obama, George Bush, Bush's whole family, you know. We'll show the Prince on here, various people from Hollywood throwing various other Illuminati signs, the 666 that, you know, Joel Osteen, the preacher, you can see him doing that. You can see, you know, Trump does it all the time. There are, you know, multiple signals that these people use, but, you know, it's not coincidence. You've seen all these leaders using a satanic salute. Here's televangelist Benny Hinn. He's made millions marketing Jesus. Pat Robertson doing it too. Before, you know, what was called the victory sign and the peace sign was popularized, that's long been a satanic salute. But it seems the horns have become more popular in recent years, maybe since about the 80s, at the heavy metal concerts, I think, is probably where that really got introduced more. However, what we see is these people, they're all networked, they're showing us. You know, we saw George Bush's Skull and Bones ring, and we will hear him later. We'll hear Bush Sr. and Bush Jr. announcing the New World Order. Bush Jr. calls it the New Order of the Ages. They both refer to it as something that's been long awaited from ancient times. Rather interesting to hear what these guys say. I mean, it should be pretty clear that there's something going on here. If we look here at the Beatles' yellow submarine photo, we show them doing the 666 and the horns. What's that tell us? This has been around a while. They were used to introduce more drug culture. Their lyrics were mostly probably written by Tavistock, human behavior scientists, to affect change. And it wasn't good. And John Lennon knows that, and he's spoken out. But he's dead now. So for me, between studying about the conspiracy to create a new world order and Mormonism and a lot of older texts and things, you know, Joseph Smith and his prophecies, and my personal involvement with people who were involved in Freemasonry and or witchcraft, I guess I saw enough things to realize that I wasn't, that the picture painted by the church, the manifest destiny picture basically that they were promoting within, well, especially First Nephi, in the Book of Mormon and elsewhere, and you know, things that we would hear from Ezra Taft Benson and the writings of Joseph Smith. Things weren't quite right, and things didn't line up. Things didn't line up with First Nephi chapter 13 and other places there. From actually, I did a video just in the last week or two, pretty much about First Nephi chapter 13. So when we really look at history, it doesn't match up. The whole American, the forming of the American nation, and the history that we have, which is a rewritten history, we've got a false history, just like the church has a false history. When you look at primary source documents, when you look at
what really happened in the church, you realize, hey, they've lied to us. And when you look at what happened, in America, it's not like they've been told. We've been told, half the colonists came, as slaves from Europe, and we're not told that. We're told about, the black slaves, but we're not told about hundreds of thousands of people that came as slaves. And to cover up, trying to make it sound like, those that they called indentured servants were treated, better than, someone as a slave, and it's not the case. The laws are horrendous. I've done stuff, showing that as well. If you read the laws and you read what was going on in America in pre-colonial, before the, even after the Constitution was written and approved, but before it and after it, I mean, like what was it, Carolinas or Virginia, where they had a law, they had a bill before the assembly at least, that they were trying to make it so that for you to be in the legislature there, that you had, one of the requirements was you had to at least be an owner of at least one Caucasian slave, and bet you didn't hear that in your history class in school. I mean, if you were a woman and your master raped you, a European slave. I'm not just talking about African slaves. You wind up with you're in the indentured servitude program. You have a child that, depending on the location, that child might be automatically enslaved till they're 25 or 30 years old. The age is differed depending on the jurisdiction you're in. But, what went on was horrendous. But we're not told a lot of what happened. And when we read the Book of Mormon, and it says only people could get to the Americas were people that God guided. So God guided slavery. I mean, anyway, I've done other videos on that, gotten into the details. What's in the Book of Mormon does not match what happened. What happened was horrendous, and people were not coming out of captivity in Great Britain into freedom. Half of the people came as slaves. That's we get the term kidnapping out of that era. So it's probably new to you, and that's a different video. But I began to wake up and see, the Treaty at Versailles, all kinds of things did not support the story we got in the Book of Mormon and from the Brethren. And then if we take a look at some of the logos used by the corporations, because this video's got a lot about corporations, we'll see plenty of them using satanic and Illuminati symbolism. You'll see, like with Disney, if you look carefully, you'll see 666, Time Warner, there's a 666 and an I. Looking from down, from above down on the pyramid at like Argo, Chase Manhattan, BMW, the pyramid or triangle, you'll see, companies like America Online, Fidelity Investments. Time after time, you'll see it. Those are some of the more obvious ones. Sometimes it's more cleverly hidden. But when we get into how the corporations are really running things in the economic system, in the political system, it will become really tied together, I think. To mention a few other big names there, we saw the vice presidents for both of the Bush presidents. We saw Dan Quayle, who was vice president for George Bush Sr. and for George Jr. We saw Dick Cheney. Both of those guys were using the horns, satanic salute. And we took a look at, or have or will, at the Pope doing a Masonic handshake there with Vladimir Putin, Russia's head of state. Okay, so after Putin, we saw the Pope pulling the Masonic greeting there with Tony Blair, Britain's prime minister, past prime minister at this point. We saw the Queen doing her Masonic greeting with I don't even know who that was, embarrassed to say. We saw the Pope throwing the horns with his red cape on. We saw the Prince throwing the horns. We've seen Masonic greetings from Gordon B. Hinckley with Dick Cheney in a handshake, and also with Thomas Monson and George Bush, heads of the church and heads of state. And did you know these guys were Masons? I didn't know that, that Hinckley and Monson were Masons, but if you look at that handshake, it's pretty clear that these guys have a common brotherhood going on when you take a look at that. So there's, there were some celebrities we saw using various Illuminati signs, whether it's, throwing the horns or doing the all-seeing eye or the 666. They're all throwing their signs out there. these people are linked together. That's why you see them move from the top of, one field of profession to another, from, acting to politics or something of that nature. It's just, of course, Cheney, so he was also head of Halliburton. When he's vice president, he was not. He'd stepped down, but he owned millions of dollars of Halliburton stock, and Halliburton, of course, went in to rebuild the infrastructure in Iraq. What a coincidence again, right? I bet that was profitable. So, as I said earlier, there are apologists that try to explain things away, one little item at a time or something, but, taken as a whole, it's well beyond coincidence that you see these folks using the Masonic greetings and flashing the satanic signs, power broker after power broker doing it. It's pretty clear that it's well beyond coincidence, as well as the symbols that we see embedded in church architecture and so forth. Now, if this is the first time you've noticed this sort of thing, it can be pretty shocking, and I'm aware of that. I've experienced it myself. You say, wait a minute, no, that's not possible. This is the prophet of the Lord. That's got to be a mistake. Maybe somebody photoshopped it. Well, we're going to look at some other things as well. We're not done yet, and we're going to see what these people actually do to assist one another in the agenda that they're all apparently working for. Of course, this isn't intended to be a course on recognizing occult or Illuminati symbolism. Some people are going to be well acquainted with this already. Other people are going to be still brainwashed from Fox News and think it's some sort of theory. There's plenty of material available to find your own evidence on this. David Icke, Greatest Secret, you can find that on Sacred Texts for free, just to read it. There are some offensive words occasionally, though. Not a lot, but occasionally. So what you are able to see here is it's beyond coincidence that these political, religious, and other leaders, celebrities are using satanic signs, hand signs to each other, and exchanging Masonic grips, especially in situations that seem really bizarre, if you're not up on the fact that these guys are actually interconnected, networked. So, taking a look at just some of the corporate logos really quickly here before we get into the documentation on what's going on in the corporate world, which is pretty foolproof. So here in the...
Wow, this is really cool that I can actually pause this and insert a little commentary, doing this as a streaming thing for the first time. So, yeah, I mentioned David Icke there. He's got a lot of stuff that I previously, verified with, study over many years that was very accurate. And yet the first time I read some of his stuff, it's well, he says some things that are just not connected with the version of reality that most of us have. So what I wanted to mention was that I was able to deal with that and just say, okay, well, my belief system was Mormonism, and so when he talked about beings, that were on the negative side, the way he described them was, different from, what we get in Mormonism or Christianity. But I guess I tried to draw some parallels there. And the other lesson is that because someone has some, metaphysical experience or beliefs that are maybe different from what I have or what you have, doesn't mean that we need to throw out everything that they say. And that's something that Mormon apologists have really tried to train us to do, is just to discredit people, just discredit everything they say. They find one thing that they feel like they can exploit as being faulty in some regard, and then just say, okay, well, this guy, he's weird. He believes some weird things, or he's gay or something, like like what they might have said about D. Michael Quinn, who wrote Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview. So the church apologists love to discredit somebody by finding some fault, and then it's like, okay, well, everything they said is a lie. Whereas the opposite is true, with the church actually, Jesus Christ is supposed to be a perfect and omniscient being, so truthfully, he only has to be proven to lie once, because everything is based upon him being perfect. So if he's lying in the scriptures, then that's a real problem. But if a regular person just is not a perfect person, it doesn't mean that everything that comes out of their mouth is not true. And like I said, I was well aware of many well-documented things that that I saw that David Icke was also aware of. So he seems to actually be a pretty honest guy, although he said some things that seem like they're in they're in a realm that we probably can't confirm. But I don't think that we have to believe or disbelieve anything else that he references with regard to research in matters of this world, and discredit it because we might not ascribe, or we may not we might not sign on ourselves to some of his metaphysical beliefs. Well, let's keep rolling.
Here in the symbols, just so you can recognize some things. You learn to look for the 666, look for the the Eye of Horus, and pyramid and triangle, those sort of things, and you'll find a lot of them. And in some of them, like the 666, tend to be cleverly concealed. The pyramid and that sort of a thing, no, it's kind of out in the open because we're used to seeing it on the dollar bill, even though it is basically the Illuminati's logo. So, and if you read up on the dollar bill business, sure, there are folks that make excuses, try to make it sound like it's A-okay, but just say basically introducing the conception of or announcing the conception of the New Order of the Ages, essentially what the Latin means. If you look it up, what's on the back of the dollar bill, and you will hear George Bush announcing the New Order of the Ages, just exactly as it says back there. Something that had been sought for long, for ages. And you listen to these guys, listen to the Bushes. They're obviously talking about some ancient order that they're involved with. It's pretty clear. All this should be enough to at least wake you up to the fact that there's really something going on, and it's not like you've been told in Sunday school or on Fox News, and certainly not what you've been told on CNN.
Luciferianism is, and continues to be, the ruling class religion since the time of the ancient mystery and fertility religions. And Lucifer is exalted. These mystery religions have continued today in Freemasonry, Skull and Bones, and through also the Jesuits and the Catholic Church. But it is also in almost every aspect of society. So much so that someone sold into the spiritual blindness offered by the Luciferian philosophy in its many forms will not even notice this happening. On the subject of Luciferianism, Philip D. Collins states the following: Luciferianism is the product of religious engineering, which sociologist William Sims Bainbridge defines as the conscious, systematic skilled creation of a new religion. In actuality, this is a tradition that even precedes Bainbridge. It has been the practice of Freemasonry for years. It was also the practice of Masonry's religious and philosophical progenitors, the ancient pagan mystery cults. The inner doctrines of the Mesopotamian secret societies provided the theological foundations for the Christian and Judaic heresies, Kabbalism.
We also have Donald Trump coming
on and saying that he really respects and he gets his advice from Richard Haass. Now, who is Richard Haass? Richard Haass is the president of the Council on Foreign Relations. He is a well-known Bilderberg member. He has served George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush when they were in power, and according to Richard Haass's spokesperson, Richard Haass briefed Trump on foreign policy in August of 2015, and now...
Hey, I want to interrupt that again. So those Christian guys that were talking about Luciferianism, you know, they're going to have a different viewpoint possibly from most members of the church, but they have some good points there. And like I said, we don't need to just throw away what they say just because they're Christians, you know. A lot of the Luciferian doctrines are pretty cool, and things that are, you know, incorporated in Mormonism, the Swedenborgian things, the eternal progression. They sound good to a Christian. Christians, you know, find that all blasphemy. They're kind of like Islamic fundamentalists sometimes, it seems, defending their God and their belief that God should not be blasphemed or anything. And of course, you know, Albert Pike wrote, he wrote a lot in Morals and Dogma of the ancient and accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry, and the guy was obviously pretty bright, and he knew a lot about, you know, history and Masonic history and so forth. And so the mystery religions, include magic, and his familiarity with other secretive or secret societies such as the Illuminati, which he, you know, mentions as well, was pretty strong. I mean, he was communicating with, was it Giuseppe Manzini, who formed the Mafia, who was also like a 33rd degree Freemason as well as Albert Pike was. And well, we just keep finding these people at the heads of everything are these 32nd and 33 degree Freemasons. It's just they're everywhere, you know, Christianity, all these religions, you know, and they are the architects of the New World Order. And we hear these things in this occult language being used by people like Bill Clinton or you know, the Bushes talking about the new order of the ages being anticipated for eons and generations and all these things. And you begin to realize that they are part of something that's not familiar to you. And it is a Luciferian religion, and it's not it's not the religion that they market when they are the heads of Christian religions. They don't ascribe to, you know, they don't follow the religion that they preach. They preach something else that brings in money, you know, and gets loyal followers, people that do service, and give them like a tithing base, which is kind of the same thing that the Freemasons do. You know, they're lower level people, or not. They're just like low-level Mormons, people that are not in the society, part of the ruling class that most Mormons are completely unaware of. You know, Illuminism permeates our society, and some of these secret societies have been relegated to the level of myth. They've been purposely degraded to become, you know, urban legend and myth by the media and sometimes by the, you know, church, so that we'll think it's just something fake, you know, kind of like the way that the Disney company does that with a lot of things from the metaphysical world. Okay, let's get back on it. That's why it's called a cult. Hidden esoteric knowledge. Science, alchemy, mysticism, the mystery religions, magic, Christianity, they all were one, and they probably will all become one again. But for now, they try to separate everything. They try to separate science from the metaphysical. But you find that these greatest scientists, philosophers, inventors, and all these famous people in history, they were part of the mystery religions, and they were involved with secretive societies or secret societies. Whether it's, Newton or Da Vinci or Kant or Swedenborg, Benjamin Franklin. Okay, let's keep rolling.
And now Trump is saying on national television that he really respects Richard Haas, that he gets his advice from this man who is the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, which many people say is the nation's most influential foreign policy think tank group in the United States. This is what Dick Cheney had to say about this quasi-secret society.
Council on Foreign Relations, as Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
Obviously keeping it secret that he was a large proponent of the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations was actually started in 1921 by Warburg, by J.P. Morgan, by Rockefeller as a front group to get more power and control to establish a new world order. The very fact that he worships and respects Richard Haas, the very fact that he considers a war criminal like John Bolton a part of his national security team is extremely worrisome, to say the least, because all these men are interconnected with the Bohemian Grove, with the Council on Foreign Relations, with the Bilderberg Group, the establishment behind the scenes that really pulls the strings in this world.
I look out at this audience filled with not only many friends and colleagues, but people who have served in prior administrations. And so there is never a time when the inbox is not full. Thank you very much, Richard, and I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, I guess, the mothership in New York City, but it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have this far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election.
So, did we really get the full import of what Hillary Clinton just said? As the Secretary of State of the United States of America, she was saying that she just goes down the street to be told what to do by an NGO, by a non-elected body of globalists. She is told what to do in her office as the Secretary of State. Does that not sound like treason to somebody out there? I mean, hello? Yeah, her fiduciary responsibility is supposed to be to the American people, not to a bunch of, globalist elitists in the CFR, whose, published intent is to submerge America into a global government and relinquish sovereignty.
So Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, is saying she goes down the street
I guess I said this before, huh?
members of an NGO what she should be doing in her fiduciary duty to the American people as the Secretary of State.
Wow,
She's asking a non-elected body of a society that has stated that its sole purpose is to create a world government and destroy the sovereignty of the United States and create nation states which are part of a world government. Now, does that sound like treason? And we saw Dick Cheney saying that he didn't bother to tell his constituents that he was part of the CFR. He was a big boy in the CFR. And then, of course, Donald Trump is taking his foreign policy advice from the head of the CFR as well. We begin to see that the political lines are really more of a facade here. Behind the scenes, these people are all working for the same internationalists. Now, getting back to the story, I was going to talk about how facts are obfuscated and history is blurred for us by those in leadership when it doesn't work for what they want us to believe.
The firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way.
Let me give a little quick example of how that type of thing works. For instance, I was in an elders quorum meeting once, and the quorum president was teaching a lesson, and wasn't getting any answers for the question he asked. He wanted to know something about Adam, so he asked me. Branch president was there too, and he said, "Tell me something about Adam." And I said, "Well, Brigham Young taught that he was God, which happens to be a fact. You read the Adam God doctrine." And he's like, "What?" And the branch president said, "What? I've never heard of that." And I said, "Well, that's fact." And then there was a missionary there, and he piped up. He said, "Well, Joseph Fielding Smith said it was just taken out of context." Well, I decided not to make a ruckus, but I've actually read multiple discourses in the Journal of Discourses from Brigham Young and others. I think it was Jedediah Grant, who was also in the First Presidency, with regard to that doctrine and saying, yeah, if you don't believe it, you're going to hell. So it wasn't taken out of context. I read the talks, not just excerpts. And but so Joseph Fielding Smith knows it wasn't just something taken out of context, and just like he knew that the church was named the Church of Christ, then the Church of Jesus Christ, then the Church of the Latter-day Saints, then the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But if you look at what he writes in Essentials in Church History, that's not what he says. So he gives a history that he knows is not true. It's factual. You can, actually one of my videos, I documented that. So one that talks about Joseph Fielding Smith and Gordon Hinckley writing false history. So it's in the title. You can find it in the Mormon Truth video library on this channel. So just one example, and they do it all the time with stuff on television to try to, turn everything into just an unbelievable conspiracy theory. It's all baloney. It's all urban legend. It's like the Danites are, like urban legend. They're pioneer legend. They're not just legend. They killed a lot of people, and they were under the control of the First Presidency. If you do your research, you'll find out. It's not like you've been told in Sunday school. Anyway, let's keep going. We're just showing unveiling things, and you can figure it out. Make your own decisions, but we're putting the evidence out there. And the corporate stuff is really big. As far as symbolisms to wake up to in the church, you will notice things that are common with Freemasonry. You'll also maybe notice the Illuminati torch, like for the young women's. You'll notice Masonic language with regards to the establishment of the Relief Society. If you understand Masonic language or research it, maybe look up Royal Arch Masonry, do some reading, and you'll start to see terminology and phrases that you've heard in the Doctrine and Covenants and so forth as well. Occult symbols on some of the temples, the pentagrams and so forth, all-seeing eye. And you'll hear some, like I said, there are apologists, there are people that try to cover it up, and explain it away. Same thing they do on television. They'll give you a little bit, a portion of the truth, say something about the Knights Templar or the Illuminati, and say, basically they'll turn them into an urban legend, give you a little bit of truth and put a spin on it. If you investigate, you got to investigate details. But you're going to see enough here, and that you're going to know that something isn't the way you've been told. It's pretty obvious, and American history isn't the way you've been told, and it's not the manifest destiny story that they tell you in 1 Nephi chapter 13 and thereabouts. Things are different than what we've been told. Okay, so just a couple more notes on how they kind of redefine history, and then we're getting into the corporate structure, the invisible government. Starting really back with Joseph Smith. This has been going on a long time. So about him.
But he threw a lot of Masonic stuff in the Book of Mormon, and that's, like a dozen years before he actually joined Freemasonry, but he was involved with the occult. Very much so. There's a seer stone that supposedly he saw the English words for the Egyptian on that in his hat. That's what his wife said, that's what Emma said, that's what her dad said, that's what David Whitmer said, that's what Martin Harris said, and Oliver Cowdery just said he used the Urim and Thummim in the hat, which we call this sometimes the Urim and Thummim, they call the Magic Spectacles, which supposedly Moroni took back after the 116-page thing. And we see these pictures like Joseph Smith's trying to figure out what the plates mean by looking at them. But everybody that worked with him, his wife and everybody said that's not what happened. Here's the first vision, except for that's the one that nobody ever knew about, his family never knew about. The father and son thing, that's not historically. There's the, Moroni with him all alone in his room, which is not what, he shares his room with like 4 brothers and they only had 2 beds. A lot of times we have pictures that try to present evidence to our mind, and it's not necessarily something that's true, but it goes right into our head. Subconscious. There's the one angel appearing to him, the first vision story that he told, that William told, and what his family knew about. Sometimes it was an angel, sometimes they said it was the Lord, sometimes they said it was in the woods or in his room, but it wasn't it was never in 1820, and it was never with, the father and the son, until he published that in 1842, 2 years before he died. So anyway, I probably rambled way too much here. I want to get into the financial proof of what something is going on in the United States that is completely different from what you believe you have in terms of representative government. I'm talking about a completely different invisible government set up by means of the corporation. We're going to find out we've got a completely different... These guys all work together. Okay, so I want to explore some highlights here of a video called The Corporation Nation, which is just mind-blowing in terms of how things are actually operating with regard to finance and the government of the United States, what we believe is the government. So I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning here. It says, 97% of Utah is federally owned. Okay, so the hidden wealth from this investment, we don't need to have a national debt. We don't need all sorts of issues. He's going to show how the Fortune 500 companies are basically, the majority of their stock is collectively owned within the networked group of these 185,000 government corporations, which are not owned by the people. They should be, but they're not. And the budget, all we see is, with their normal, what they collect from the people, and not with their investments made from what they saved and invested, and the control that is exercised by these major corporations, because they elect the board of governors, the board of governors, the board of directors, because they own the majority of the stock, so they control everything, and it's just amazing. So it's complete conflict of interest. It's complete conflict of interest in everything. Things are not. It's an entirely another world. So I'm gonna go ahead and you can see what I've just got rolled in front of you a little bit here. I'm gonna play some highlights here. Everything that you think the way they
examine what the former here in states, the United States District Court for the District of Utah. After some research, I found that the two-letter abbreviations that all 50 states have been assigned are simply federal district locator codes. States are still called by their full original names in name only. And you thought your state abbreviation was just for your convenience, so that you didn't have to write it out on letters, perhaps? Are other states in the same predicament? You betcha. Here is the state constitution for the state of Ohio. Now, an interesting note about Ohio, instead of entering and leaving what most states call the city limit, the signs in Ohio state that you are entering or leaving the corporation limit. Here are a few snapshots of these signs. This one is especially interesting, a 40-year before and after shot. Notice that the sign has changed, and a new speed limit is now posted for entrance into the corporation known as Gambier. This is common as each corporation has different speed limits. It also ensures that certain percentages of taxpayers will be speeding once they cross the corporate line, and that means speeding tickets, and that, my friend, means corporate revenue. Back to the Ohio State Constitution. When I click on the link, Organization of Cities, etc., I get the following page. The General Assembly shall provide for the organization of cities and incorporated villages by general laws and restrict their power so as to prevent the abuse of such power. Now, the key word here is obviously incorporated, but also organization is a corporate term, just as businesses are organized and then reorganized in a bankruptcy. And just as the United States as a federal corporation has been reorganized more than one time in its history. In order to qualify this as true and break through the belief system set up by the corporate media, you may pause this video now and read this statement by Republican James Traficant, which is in congressional record and was stated before he was thrown into jail. In Corporate Bankruptcy Code, Chapter 9 bankruptcies are allowed only for state municipalities. Chapter 9 bankruptcies are a form of corporate reorganization and not liquidation. So just what is a municipality? To get the answer to this, I went to a commonly used website named Wikipedia. Now, I don't usually use Wikipedia as a source, but in this case I made an exception.
The information is well-sourced and easily verifiable. A municipality, or municipal corporation, is the legal term for a local governing body, including but not necessarily limited to cities, counties, towns, townships, charter townships, villages, and boroughs, like the 5 boroughs which comprise New York City proper. Municipal incorporation occurs when such municipalities become self-governing corporate entities under the laws of the state or province in which they are located. Often, this event is marked by the award or declaration of a municipal charter from the state of incorporation. Let's take one of the largest states as an example. Do you live in California? If so, which corporation do you live in? There are 480 incorporated municipalities in California, of which 458 are called cities and 22 are called towns. Under California law, the terms city and town are explicitly interchangeable. See Government Code sections 34500 through 34504. So, the name of a municipal corporation can either be city of blank or town of blank, regardless of its population. The term township is obsolete. The terms villages and borough have never been used in California. Here's an alphabetical list, and I'll bet that you find your own city or town. Notice that the left-hand column lists the city or municipality, the middle column lists the county where that municipality is housed, which is a totally separate corporate entity with its own local, national, and international investments and enterprise operations that must also file a comprehensive annual financial report every end of business year. And the right-hand column shows the date of incorporation for the city or municipality, some going more than a century back in history. Are you sweating yet, Mr. Walker? Which corporation do you live in? Sacramento, my hometown. So let's use California as our example state. California has one of the largest economies in the world. All of this business is conducted within the over 18,000 different governments within the state, each one a separate incorporated entity. If you have a private business incorporated anywhere within the state of California, it must be incorporated within one of these municipalities and within the state's corporate guidelines. Each corporate city or town that was just listed has within them other municipal corporate structures like school districts, pension funds, utility companies, city councils, and even enterprise operations such as golf courses, movie theaters, malls, etc., etc. As stated earlier, the government owns just about everything you see through collective investment. But you must not think of these as just individual corporations, for as we saw above with the Salt Lake City Corporation, these more than 18,000 corporate governments in California are like bank branches as well. The only way to get a grasp on the power, wealth, prosperity, land, and property ownership of the state of California is to take all of these over 18,000 individual corporate governments, including school districts, counties, the state corporation, municipalities, enterprise operations, cities, towns, pension funds, etc., not forgetting its foreign investments and operations. For instance, CalSTRS is now an offshore multinational corporate. But don't stop there. For then, you must consider that collectively, between the municipalities and individual corporate governments within all 50 of the United States proper, America houses over 185,000 different corporate governments, municipalities, and entities, which we might as well call branches. Now, the word collective is vital to comprehend here, for as one giant framework of a country, this collective corporate United States government owns almost everything in sight. And this will be shown later in this presentation. The United States has now been almost completely privatized, with land and municipalities often being sold off to foreign investors and foreign private corporations. In fact, under Executive Order 12803, signed by then President of the United States, George H.W. Bush, in 1992, the Corporation of the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., neither a state nor a part of the 50 States United, this federal corporate government was given the authority to privatize most or all of the infrastructure within the United States without congressional consent or vote. This means that the federal government, or the corporation that acts in lieu of a federal government, can and has allowed the selling of any municipalities or city or any government's assets which were built with taxpayer monies, including but not limited to roads, tunnels, bridges, electricity supply facilities, mass transit, rail transportation, airports, ports, waterways, recycling wastewater treatment facilities, solid waste disposal facilities, hospitals, prisons, schools, and housing. Executive Order 12803 lists these as examples of America's saleable and or leasable infrastructure. But this is not to be taken as a complete list, as these are just some examples of what our government has been selling off to foreign investors for almost 20 years. Executive Order 12803 names this authority in its destructive pages as infrastructure privatization, and states that this power allows for the, quote, disposition or transfer of an infrastructure asset, such as by sale or by long-term lease from a state or local government to a private party. Now, wasn't it our good friend David Walker who said that the government isn't interested in selling off these assets that they don't list on the taxpayer budget? Well, what is the government doing with all of these investments? Why does the U.S. why does the federal government own 95% of Nevada, 97%?
Okay, that's an issue of federal lands. Okay, federal land. That's correct. And you are correct in saying that that's not an analogy. They don't value that because they have no intention to sell it. All right? I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just trying to explain.
Is it the government's land or is it our land?
It's supposed to be.
But if the government is a corporation, and it's actually 185,000 different corporations, how is something owned by a corporation our land?
The government is not.
Yes, it is. Most certainly, all corporations have to file a comprehensive independence report.
But the government is not a corporation.
It's most certainly is.
I can assure you it's
Really? It is not a corporation. When we look at Executive Order 12803, Infrastructure Privatization, we read in Section 1, Definitions, for purposes of this order, A, privatization means the disposition or transfer of an infrastructure asset, such as by sale or by long-term lease from a state or local government to a private party. In other words, the selling of taxpayer-funded infrastructure to private corporations or individuals. B, infrastructure asset means any asset financed in whole or in part by the federal government, in other words, taxpayer money, and needed for the functioning of the economy. Examples of such assets include, but are not limited to, roads, tunnels, etc. And D, transfer price means the amount paid or to be paid by a private party for an infrastructure asset if the asset is transferred as a result of a competitive bidding. This, my friends, is why the carpool lanes on your freeways and highways have turned into toll roads that you must pay to use. A private corporation now leases or owns those lanes, either outright or through public-private partnerships or PPPs, despite being built with your taxpayer monies. This is also why closed-circuit TV cameras are now mounted just about everywhere you look, monitoring your every move at every major intersection that you cross. This is why the parking police in Hollywood are actually part of a private corporation based in New York City that only hires minorities and who takes no oath to the Constitution. This is why the parking meters in downtown Chicago now cost $27 to park for only half an hour. They were sold off and leased to private enterprises. And this is why your gas, electric, sewer, trash, and other utility prices are going through the roof. Privatization means deregulation. Deregulation means no limitations on pricing due to the monopolistic authority granted by the state through these partnerships. This is the privatization of America, referred to above as infrastructure privatization. This is corporate fascism, ruled by corporate government proxy. This is the corporatization of the United States. In another article by Yantha Jean Dugan, entitled Facing Budget Gaps, Cities Sell Parking, Airports Zoo, she writes, cities and states across the nation are selling and leasing everything from airports to zoos, a fire sale that could help plug budget holes now, but worsen their financial woes over the long run. California is looking to shed state office buildings. Milwaukee has proposed selling its water supply. In Chicago and New Haven, Connecticut, it's parking meters. In Louisiana and Georgia, airports are up for grabs. Many governments are using asset sales to balance budgets ravaged by declines in tax revenues and unfunded pensions. In recent congressional testimony, billionaire investor Warren Buffett said he worried about how municipalities will pay for public workers' retirement and health benefits, and suggested that the federal government may ultimately be compelled to bail out states. Remember, a bailout means a purchase. Some properties are being sold at fire sale prices into a weak market. The deal means cities are giving up long-term, recurring recurring income streams in exchange for lump sum payments to plug one-time budget gaps. The current deals are fundamentally different because control of the asset transfers to private hands. The most popular deals in the works are metered municipal street and garage parking spaces. One of the first was Chicago, where the city received $1.16 billion in 2008 to allow a consortium led by Morgan Stanley to run more than 36,000 metered parking spaces for 75 years. The city continues to set the rules and rates for the meters and collect the parking fines, but the investors keep the revenues, which this year will more than triple the $20 million the city was collecting, according to credit rating firms. In other words, if you live in Chicago, Morgan Stanley is charging you for parking on the streets that your fathers built. Based on the new rates, the Inspector General claimed the city was shortchanged by about $1 billion. The investors will make their money back in 20 years, and we are stuck for 50 more years making $0. Around the country, at least a dozen public parking systems are up for bid, including in San Francisco and Las Vegas. In Pittsburgh, the mayor is proposing to lease out the parking system for an upfront sum of about $300 million over 50 years and funnel the money back into the pension system. But the city will ultimately lose $3.5 billion over the life of the lease. And guess which group will ultimately have to make up that deficit? You got it. You, the taxpayer. Remember, the corporation is not interested in good fiscal policy. Its sole purpose is to make its shareholders a profit. Water supply is also being sold to private interests. In Milwaukee, a consumer advocate called a plan to sell the water system, mortgaging Milwaukee's future. A report by Washington-based Food and Water Watch says private water service in general costs 59% more as new owners seek to recoup their investment. Water users cannot vote private managers or state-appointed regulators out of office. When you as the public cannot vote your officials out of office, you as the public do not have a constitutional or representative government. Airports are also being privatized under a limited federal program. Now, you may have noticed that one of the saleable items in the above list was housing. Strange as that sounds, the truth is even stranger. Here's the deal. You are not the owner of your land or your home. You are actually listed as a tenant on your title and deed, regardless of whether your home is paid in full or not. You may stay in your home under one condition, that you pay your property taxes. Property tax can simply be defined as extortion or racketeering. It is rent paid to the government, municipality, county, and state for which your house resides as protection money, so that your house is not confiscated. If you believe this to be untrue, that you are indeed the master of your own home, then I would invite you to stop paying your rent in the form of property tax to the government. The corporate police will be summoned to remove you from your home for your lack of payment of property tax, and your land and home will be reabsorbed into the municipality and probably sold at auction to the next fool who thinks that they have the freedom and right of ownership. Eminent domain is virtually undefendable, as you were never the property owner in the first place. This is the corporatization of liberty. So just what is corporatism? The word corporation is derived from the Latin word corpus, which translates into English as body. Formal corporatist models are based upon the contract of corporate groups such as agriculture, business, ethnic, labor, military, patronage, scientific, or religious affiliations into a collective body. There's that word again, collective. For instance, all individual Methodist churches pay the main corporate church, which is indeed a for-profit corporation, with each of their individual 501c3 houses of worship across the country and the world acting as their non-profit branches. This is why all denominations hold general conferences. They are nothing but giant corporate budget meetings. In this way, churches can be regulated by the state. Not comprehending that the Constitution we hold so dear provides for not only religious freedom, free of corporate tyranny and control, but for the freedom to peacefully assemble without government interference and without taxation of any kind. Non-profit status for churches is a redundancy that is both repugnant and absolutely unnecessary. This is the corporatization of God. And yes, the military, as a government-owned entity, entity as a constitutionally forbidden standing army is a corporately held private world police force, currently guarding poppy seeds in Afghanistan, oil fields in Iraq, and having bases of operation in just about every country in the world. This is the state of the corporate military today, to protect and serve the continuity of the government, or the corporation. This is the corporatization of war. This age-old recipe of corporatism and fascism has been utilized by most ideologies across the political spectrum. Interestingly, the idea of a central bank is actually one of the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. And indeed, all of these Marxist ideals of how to turn a government into a communist state have been made into law in the United States federal government through executive orders, presidential directives, acts of Congress, and other legislation. Equally as intriguing, the term democracy is actually a communist term, completely opposite of the constitutional idealism of a republic. The difference? Simply stated, democracy is a majority rule. So, if 51% of the people get what they want, then 49% of the people get something they don't want. Democracy is two wolves and a sheep sitting down to discuss dinner plans. Whereas a republic form of government, which is guaranteed by the Constitution, is well-armed sheep. What did the Founding Fathers think of democracy? The word democracy does not ever appear in the Declaration of Independence nor in the Constitution. It also never appears in any of the 50 state constitutions. In short, we are not supposed to be a democracy. The Founding Fathers actually did everything they could to keep our new country out of a democracy, knowing that a democracy is just a patriotic word for an oligarchy. Here's what some of the Founding Fathers had to say about a democracy. Quote, "Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths." Unquote. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, from the Federalist Papers, essay number 10. Quote, "We are a republican government. Real liberty is never found in the despotism or the extremes of democracy." Unquote. Alexander Hamilton. Quote, "Democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself." Unquote. Samuel Adams. Rome was a democracy as it fell in 180 AD, as all historically significant democratic empires have. Now, politicians and corporations will denounce this, ridiculously proclaiming that we have a democratic republic. But in truth, the two concepts are too opposite from each other to be used to describe each other. This would be like describing a color as blackish white. The Bill of Rights are not privileges to be suffocated and chiseled away by legalities and statutes forced upon the public by corporate government weasels in fancy suits, ties, and black robes. Government-owned corporations were never intended to be the police, the treasury, the municipalities or cities, the army, or the appointed legislators. But this is what we have become, a democracy. A better title would be an oligarchic corpocracy, or fascism. Corporations owned through a collective investment by the government, whom advertise popular candidates like Obama, knowing that once he is elected, he will appoint former, current, and future corporation lobbyists and attorneys, CEOs, and board members into positions favorable to private corporate government no-bid contracts, thus ensuring future revenue generation for the government-owned corporations while generating wealth and kickbacks for the corporate representatives that are appointed by the elected official, namely the President of the United States Corporation, U.S. Inc. Remember, by electing one person as president, you are giving permission to that person to appoint hundreds and hundreds of unelected officials, who then also appoint unelected officials under themselves, and thousands of appointed corporate power brokers with fancy titles like Chief of Staff and Secretary of Defense. The point here is this: you do not have a representative government. End of story.
Thus, when we hear our politicians and media hounds constantly harping about bringing democracy to the rest of the world, what this really means is that the United States Incorporated wants to expand its business base internationally, be it oil in Iraq, poppy seeds in Afghanistan, water and mineral rights in South America, or simply the power to
use our corporate and United Nations-controlled military to destroy a country's infrastructure so that companies like Halliburton can receive billions in taxpayer money
to rebuild the newly controlled asset. Now, who supplies the bombs for the private military? Could that be companies like General Dynamics and flown in by Northrop Grumman and McDonnell Douglas? How about Boeing? How about General Electric? How about Martin Marietta? How about Lockheed Martin? How about Raytheon? How about DuPont, 3M? It gives business to company after company. And who owns stock in that company? It's the federal government and the state governments and the municipalities, all as individual for-profit corporations with stock holdings in these companies that are profiting vastly from the wars. So have we noticed things that are outrageously suspicious here? Have we noticed satanic symbolism in religious areas? Have we noticed politicians and other power brokers using satanic hand signs and Masonic greetings? Have we noticed people like Dick Cheney, who helped engineer that war, owns millions of dollars of stock in Halliburton? Here we've got religious leaders and political leaders all giving Masonic greetings. And these guys are just all cooperating with each other. Now, Cheney was CEO of Halliburton. Here we got President Hinckley. He's an expert in communication, in the art of persuasion, and he's going to show us here whose side he's really on, who he's working for. You think he's working for the Lord God? Or do you think he's working for Halliburton, Bechtel, and Bush? Let's see.
Those of us who are American citizens stand solemnly with the President of our nation. The terrible forces of evil must be confronted and held accountable for their actions. Such groups, the Book of Mormon speaks of the Gadianton law, vicious, oath-bound, and secret organization bent on the evil and destruction.
Now more than ever, as the families in the Middle East and elsewhere brace against the bombs of the American war machine, God needs to be communicating with his prophets to cry out against these modern Gadiantons and proclaim peace to the world, freedom from this wickedness. But instead, ministers of all faiths promote war. They stand as Amalekites upon the towers. In the name of patriotism, liberty, and freedom, they support war efforts and call the people to obey their wicked leaders, as the Amalekites did to the Lamanites who attacked the innocent Nephites in the Book of Mormon. And even now, as the bombs are falling in the Middle East, we ask, where's the prophet of the Lord? Gordon B. Hinckley, art thou a prophet?
I do not know what the future holds.
Well, we can't say you've never said anything honest, then.
Secret combinations, lusting for power, gain, and glory are flourishing. A secret combination that seeks to overthrow the freedom of all lands, nations, and countries is increasing. Its evil influence and control over America and the entire world.
President Thomas S. Monson was born in Salt Lake City, the son of G. Spencer and Gladys Conde Monson. He is a recipient of the Distinguished Alumnus Award from the University of Utah and a Doctor of Laws honoris causa from this university. Was sales manager and then general manager of the Deseret News Press, and served for many years as chairman of the board of Deseret News Publishing Company.
Good morning. You know, spring is coming. You can see the crocus sticking their little antenna up out of the soil and the tulips starting to poke through. It's the Ides of March. Shakespeare spoke of them. I feel heaven is close to us this hour.
It is my great pleasure and honor to represent the Board of Trustees of Brigham Young University in conferring an honorary doctoral degree upon General Brent Scowcroft. General Scowcroft, would you please join me here at the podium? In a life to which at this point has been lived across the administration of 12 presidents of the United States. General Brent Scowcroft has been a key and trusted advisor to the last 5, and as National Security Advisor to President Bush, is a steady and vital associate in ongoing relationships between the White House and leaders of all other nations across the world. Our honoree today was born in Ogden, of Mormon pioneer heritage. He grew up in a loving home with 2 older sisters, one of whom is here today, in a career made brilliant not by military air prowess, but by his special skills, incisive mind, diplomatic understanding, and tireless work schedule were to hasten his rapid rise to the highest advisory roles in the White House. During the past 3 decades, General Scowcroft's influence and responsibilities have steadily broadened. He's moved from the United States Air Force headquarters to the Office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to the White House staff, and then to 2 separate appointments as National Security Advisor, first to President Ford and now to President Bush. On July 3rd, 1991, General Scowcroft received one of America's most distinguished honors when the Medal of Freedom was presented to him by President Bush at the White House. 2 different times, once during the Ford administration and again during the first Reagan administration, it was my privilege to be part of the same executive branch team with Brent Scowcroft. For his worthy efforts in the cause of peace through service to his country, for his brilliance as an incisive and accurate analyst and advisor to the most powerful leaders of the world, and for the honorable life he lives, Brigham Young University is pleased to present to Lieutenant General Brent Scowcroft, U.S. Air Force retired, the degree of Public Service Honoris Causa.
President Hinckley, President Lee, distinguished guests, fellow graduates, a new world order will appear. The issue is not whether there will be a new world order, but whether the nature of that order will be shaped significantly by the productive involvement of the United States. Second, we have perhaps an unparalleled opportunity to help to create a new world order, one more conducive to the values Americans have held dear for 200 years. A new world order will appear. The issue is not whether there will be a new world order, but whether the nature of that order will be shaped significantly by the productive involvement of the United States. We are striving now to take advantage of the current world situation to shape this new world order and thus finally to secure the peace. The dimensions of our involvement are primarily threefold: political, economic, and security, and suggest what the new world order can and should become. We're giving special attention in this regard to the states of Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union.
That BYU graduation address, we had featured speaker Brent Scowcroft, Elder Scowcroft, General Scowcroft, and one of the architects of the NSA and most connected men on earth as far as involvement with organizations promoting the New World Order. Let's take just a quick look at Brother Scowcroft here. This is in the Superclass Index for NGO involvement. At the top of the list in the world, we've got Henry Kissinger. Down the list, we see George Shultz, David Rockefeller, Zbigniew Brzezinski, the Bush family, Paul Volcker, former head of the Fed, and Brent Scowcroft coming in at, I think that's number 10 there, just ahead of George Soros. Okay, and his involvement when you see some of these other guys. on here. Going to the next list here. This is in America. Henry Kissinger topping the list once again. Then we see the Rothschild and Bush families, Maurice Greenberg, Paul Volcker, and Brent Scowcroft. Again, right next to George Soros. Rumsfeld, Peter G. Peterson, if you know who he is. Okay, Dick Cheney. Alright, looking further here. Here's some honors he's got. He's got the Presidential Honor Medal of Freedom, and he's also in KVE. He's knighted by the Queen in the British Empire, Order of the Cross, also, and then another Grand Cross of the Order of Merit for the German Republic, and various other international things. And now here it says, before joining the Bush administration, Scowcroft was vice chairman of Kissinger Associates, longest time standing. So he's always been, partners with Kissinger, plus he was in the National Advisory Board. Kissinger's the head satanic guy in almost everything in these groups. Scowcroft's president of Scowcroft's Group, International Business Consulting Firms, and Aspen Strategy Group, Trilateral Commission, this is on Wikipedia, by the way, Council on Foreign Relations, Center for Strategic International Studies, the Atlantic Council. These are all NWO things. The Bohemian Grove, he's part of the Bohemian Club, the most perverted club on earth, probably. People like Kissinger, and then it is Scowcroft next to Kissinger, all these horrendous people, David Rockefeller. It's a huge list, but these are guys that are actually members of that particular super perverted club. So, CFR, Trilaterals, Bohemian Club, NSA, Chief, everything. And he's speaking to the BYU students. Nice. I believe they've had Brzezinski and Cheney, all, New World Order guys, CFR, Bohemian Club guys, most of them, if not all, filthy individuals, and Elder Scowcroft invited to speak at BYU there. Of course, BYU is a recruiting ground for the CIA and the NSA and the FBI. Wonder why. Here's Building 7 coming down. That's demolition. That's a no-brainer. The Twin Towers are demolition. It's not rocket science. For Building 7, it never even got hit. It went straight down with no resistance.
Stories about fraud. The Bohemian Club. As you say, Bohemian Club? That's where all those rich Republicans go up and stand naked against redwood trees, right? I've never been to the Bohemian Club, but you ought to go. It'd be good for you. Get some fresh air.
From that Bill Clinton clip there, when he mentions the Bohemian Club, or when the fellow brought it up, it took about 10 seconds for security to grab him and throw him out. They apparently don't want people talking about what the politicians and world leaders do with the fires of Moloch at the Bohemian Grove.
Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge. 100 generations have searched for this elusive path to peace, while 1,000 wars raged across the span of human endeavor. And now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order. A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Order. And this present window of opportunity during which a truly peaceful and interdependent world order might be built will not be here for too long.
When our founders declared a new order of the ages, they were acting on an ancient hope that is meant to be fulfilled.
And after 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order. And instead, it looks like we got a lot of this.
I'm well aware that members of opposing political parties are actually buddies behind the scenes. We've seen that with Bush Sr. and Clinton and various endeavors they've been in. Jimmy Carter. They're all in the Council on Foreign Relations. Here we see Mikhail Gorbachev and then Robert Schuller, and heads of religion and heads of state behind the scenes have a secret alliance. We've shown that these people are into the occult and Satanism. The Luciferian religion is the religion of the elite. So we're tying together Freemasonry, high-level Freemasonry, the occult, the Luciferian religion, which is Freemasonry in the highest degrees, Satanism, and various other secretive orders and semi-secret non-government organizations where it seems our political leaders and religious leaders and bankers and corporate leaders all come together and cooperate in something that's extremely powerful and extremely profitable for these huge corporations, which are actually privately owned, not just the ones we recognize as businesses, but those who we do not recognize normally as businesses that we thought were just publicly owned governments, our cities, states, and pension funds, etc. Now, this is part one that we're ending up here, and part two is going to have a lot more information into the corporate structure, getting into the annual financial reports of these so-called government entities, which are actually privately owned businesses, which are multinational corporations involved in investment banking and all sorts of things that would just blow your mind and will. So get into the part two of this as quickly as you're able to, and you will see the physical reality, the provable aspects of the corporate structure and the finances that these people use to basically defraud everyone out of everything that they have. These people, these structures are basically a way for the elite to live off everybody that's laboring underneath them. It's a very deceptive system of slavery. We're warned about becoming slaves. We already are slaves, and the easiest way to keep a slave is to make them think that they're free. I've got some quotes on that later, probably. I'll put in the next video some interesting stories. Now, we saw Gordon B. Hinckley in action. He got us to associate the Gadianton robbers with the people of Iraq, who had nothing at all to do with what happened to the Twin Towers and Building 7 in New York. However, he effectively associated Gadianton robbers with the Iraqis, consequently gaining support of the LDS people for a war in which the United States was the aggressor, just as much as the people, the Canaanites, were the aggressors over the people of Shum and murdered them, and then were cursed to have their land be barren and unfruitful, and they became black and were despised among all people, according to what it says in Moses. The United States forces incinerated people alive, and this prophet of the Lord endorsed it and told us that it was our civic duty. People were bound by their contracts. The Lord would not hold them responsible for what they were going to do, even though it was mass murder, which he declined to elaborate on. And he used a technique kind of like what's called feel, felt, found. I don't like war. It sounds bad. But when I really thought about it, I felt like we're the Nephites, and we're defending our liberties, our wives, our children, and our religion. But we were not. We were murdering people and doing that to them. The United States forces were the Gadianton robbers. Religious leaders are a very important part of the way things work. Just as the Book of Mormon talks about the Amalekites on the towers convincing the Lamanites to go to war with the Nephites unjustifiably, so we have the religious leaders in all countries that do that. And so we see how skillful and artful
leaders in the LDS Church are with persuasion skills. They appear to be well trained. They can use hypnotic language. They can use neuro-linguistic programming or NLP. Maybe they go to Tony Robbins seminars. I don't know. Dieter went to a very elite management school in Switzerland, where you see globalist leaders who are illuminists, and it's a who's who of Illuminati leaders in the world, and Dieter went there. And you find that in the United States, you find it all over the world, where these people go to school at private universities and so forth, and they come out with tremendous skills of persuasion and management and so forth. And like I said, you don't see a poor cobbler called to the Council of the 12. You see CEOs, corporate lawyers, surgeons, administration management, from BYU. You don't see just some humble fisherman like Peter in the New Testament. There are reasons for that. These guys are very skilled orators. They are the men of many words and speak much flattery into the people. As the Book of Mormon said, with the roles are reversed. If we watch carefully, Gordon B. Hinckley endorsed mass murder and did it in the name of patriotism. Justice will be reinforced in your Memorial Day celebrations with the church parties coming right up. So, get into section 2 on this as soon as you can. Subscribe, like, and get into the channel and see what else you can find that helps unveil the truth about church history, the changing doctrines, the obfuscation, and even the many contradictions in the scriptures. Not to mention the polygamy story as it really happened, because it wasn't polygamy at all. You've been watching the Mormon Truth video on the Dodger Game channel. We'll see you next time. Welcome to the Dodger Game channel. You are in the Mormon Truth video library contained therein. Mormon Truth videos are about bringing LDS history to light and perhaps a little American history and what's going on in the world. So it's Memorial Day weekend, it's Saturday, and I, about a day ago now, put out these videos dealing with secret combinations. So let's take a look here. They are done in 2 parts here, called Book of Mormon Warnings of Secret Combinations, Illuminated Freemasonry, the CFR, and Donald Trump Today. So, in this video, right now, I want to go into a few things that relate to these videos and this topic, as well as the entire LDS apologetics business and the discussion of the verity of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints being the kingdom of God on earth, or representing it, and as a representation of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. Constantly a topic on the internet, and I'm trying to look very objectively, if that's possible, or honestly at least, at how both sides of this work. I want to involve some comments that are posted with the number 1 of this particular the Book of Mormon Warnings video. I've been having a good conversation with someone on the subject, and this is a subject that people who paid attention to church leaders such as J. Reuben Clark and Ezra Taft Benson are pretty much into. Not so much many people now as there used to be, and this is because, in my opinion, there's been a shift in the rhetoric that we hear from church leadership regarding secret combinations and where they are centered and their effect on the government of the United States. Okay, so I think I'm going to read some comments here about those videos, or thoughts that, were at least based on conversation that came on commentary on one of those. So I'm going to go ahead and read some of those, some of the discussion between the person
using the identity of When Pigs Fly, and me using the identity of Dodger Gang. A lot of people who in the church have been aware of secret combinations had a viewpoint that appears to be limited to the manifest destiny point of view. And as we looked deeper into the origins of secret combinations, secret societies, the secret society network, the occult, and the relationships that we find between governance in what we call political government and religion, or in other words, the illusion of church and state being separated in the United States, is in fact very much an illusion as we more carefully examine how the Amalekites on the towers are the religious leaders who promote the wars that are profited by the stockholders in the businesses that participate in furnishing the materials used by the military-industrial complex. In other words, war is very profitable for some. And this doesn't really go well with some points of view that are not aware of these things. I'm starting to read the initiation of our conversation here. It says Pigs Fly, I've been observing this type of behavior of Mormon leadership for many years. Thanks for compiling it. I'll be sharing for sure. It's strange so few notice. About 18 years ago, I began to notice the divergence of the contemporary hierarchy of the church, of the original church dogma. So I began to pay more attention. This caused me to reflect upon the events which occurred 30 years ago between the presidency and Mark Hoffman. I was living and working in Salt Lake City at the time, and I didn't fully realize the significance. Another fascination is the widespread cognitive dissonance among general members, which renders them incapable of criticizing the leadership. All these observations led me to the study of the occult. Okay? Anytime I notice an organization's dogma in opposition to its behavior, I suspect the occult. The U.S. government was similar with respect to the occult. A few years ago, I saw pictures of Mormon authorities exchanging super-secret handshakes with government officials. It is astonishing how easy it is to lose friends by just pointing this out. Exchanging the filter of devotion with the filter of skepticism exposes all kinds of occult techniques utilized by the general authorities. I'm not much interested in people's superficial reasons for leaving the church. Even they are somewhat ignorant to the depth of the corruption and the occult within the church and the church's role in government. For example, some become upset about polygamy generally, but I get curious about men like Hinckley minimizing its advent and usage and declaring any member caught indulging will be excommunicated. At the same time, other prophets declare the impossibility of achieving celestial glory if you don't participate in polygamy. Many people act as if the church were to remedy their one issue, they would get back in line. But the problems of the church run much deeper. I enjoy watching other people's breakdowns and expose of general authority speeches and behavior. I know how tedious it is, so I appreciate the effort. Just finished part 2 and enjoyed that as well. I hope this was responsive to your request. I will be happy to answer the questions if I'm able. Alrighty then. Thank you. Says me. Thanks. That's very interesting. Some definite similarities between our awakening. I'm sure you noticed the same greetings that I displayed are probably what you're mentioning between Gordon B. Hinckley and Dick Cheney, Thomas Monson and George Bush. Of course, that was much more recent. I noticed his War and Peace talk, which disturbed me greatly. But I had been disturbed long before that because of Masonry. Because I became aware of what appeared to be a continuing relationship between Freemasonry and the church in a situation that I discovered in a Masonic temple when I found out that the local LDS ward used to meet in a Masonic temple, and there were other things that alerted me to that. Also, people are aware of the changes that occurred in 1990 in the endowment. Many are not aware that pretty much that was Gordon B. Hinckley appearing to follow suit with what occurred in the Scottish Rite in 1986. These are just a couple of instances in which you may notice a continuing relationship. The other thing, of course, is that Joseph Smith being a Freemason is, acknowledged by the church, but they don't bother to tell you that, things that Albert Pike would tell you regarding the true doctrine, the pure doctrine of Lucifer, which he says high-degree Freemasons need to understand, that they need to harness the seething energies of Lucifer. When you see the links between the occult and Freemasonry, that high-degree Freemasonry is the occult. Low-degree, maybe not nearly so much recognizable. They, like all such organizations, need a base of income, constituents who are used to supply their donations to the organization, financial and labor, just as many organizations do, where things are different at the top than they are at the bottom. They all need a base, they all need a constituency, whether to derive financial gain from. But the brethren at the top, we see when we listen to people like Albert Pike and his book, the short name of which is called Morals and Dogma, or Manly P. Hall, another 33rd degree Freemason and occultist, proclaiming the doctrine being of Lucifer. That just doesn't seem to mesh too well when you associate Luciferianism in an organization that the prophet of God feels the need to join and employ its rights in what he says are revealed rights as part of the LDS endowment. Trying to reconcile that is very, very challenging. Consequently, we see Masonry's affiliation with the occult minimized, if ever spoken of, in the church. We are given, if anything, the rhetoric that it's just a club, a fraternal organization, not something we're interested in, anything to divert the members of the church from realizing the association between the occult, Luciferianism, Freemasonry, and Joseph Smith and many of the early brethren, such as Brigham Young and I think about 11 of the 12, including several who became presidents of the church. It just isn't something that seems to mesh any better than water and oil when we mix the occult with leadership of God's one true church. And then when we see that the leadership of other neo-Christian or Christian religions or religious groups is also by members of occult organizations, whether they are all Freemasons or not, many are, and then involved in Ordo Templo Orientis, Theosophy, various other secret societies, Luciferian and satanic organizations. It gets to be a situation where we see, okay, all these Freemason occultists seem to be leading churches, and leading churches that seem to be working together, even with churches that are non-Christian, or people would consider non-Christians. In other words, look at the links between, say, Jerry Falwell and Liberty University and, Reverend Moon, leader of the Moonies, who finances so much. Look at the Freemasons heading up Christian evangelism. Look at people like Billy Graham, Oral Roberts, Robert Schuller, Pat Robertson, and others, and see how many of these folks are high-level Freemasons. or what other societies and groups that they mingle with. What about, Benny Hinn? I have no idea what he's involved with, but I don't consider him righteous. Religion is big money, and these guys are big Amalekites on the towers who stand up for whatever the political leaders on the Republican side of the aisle say when it comes to declaring war. In the name of patriotism, especially on Memorial Day weekend, the leaders of these churches and their underlings promote patriotism in military fashion, pretending that we are defending our freedom as the United States undermines government after government all over the world. Especially have they done so in the Middle East and Latin America. Much of it has been covert through the CIA. Overtly, we are aware of actions, especially since the proclaimed war on terror. And, as we have seen, instead of the denunciation of wars or how they were conducted that we saw by Ezra Taft Benson, who announced that we had a secret combination taking control over the United States government and over the world, especially as he noted in his 1988 October General Conference talk. But we saw Gordon B. Hinckley saying that his loyalties lay in a different direction and that we should trust our leaders who had knowledge that the general public didn't have. He replaced the mistrust Ezra Taft Benson taught with absolute trust of the leaders of the military-industrial complex, men like G.W. Bush and Dick Cheney, Colin Powell, Rumsfeld, and others, including Elder Brent Scowcroft, General Brent Scowcroft, CFR member, trilateralist, and member of many other organizations, even showing on the internet, on a very respected website, as being a member of a Bohemian Club. And inviting these men, including Zygmunt Brzezinski, who died yesterday or today, to speak to BYU students. This is not something you would expect from Ezra Taft Benson. Has there been a change? Many people in the LDS Church who follow the secret combination warnings probably think it has actually been a shift. But examining the facts, perhaps some may feel that the John Birch Society was actually controlled opposition, using techniques that we see used on Fox News. Pretending one thing, giving us part of the truth, and putting a spin on it that kept us from knowing important information that would lead us to a different conclusion and different results. The instances of Freemasons were still associated with the church, saw things that were disturbing. Okay, as well as my assessment that the establishment of the American colonies and what may have been a staged revolutionary war and possible Illuminism involved in it, the negotiators of the Treaty of Versailles had British loyalty ties. In other words, some of them were lawyers who derived their authority, of course, from the temple there in London. So, the House of Inns. So anyway, lawyers are British royalty, essentially. It is a title. Esquire is a British title. And of course, before the British burned the Constitution in the War of 1812, the Constitution contained an amendment which stated that no titled person could, be in public service of government. That didn't reappear later, and we have a bunch of lawyers running the country now, who's obviously they're tied to the British royalty. Maybe it's not obvious. Alright. So, these guys set us up for subservience and a great financial burden in that treaty. If you read the Treaty of Versailles, it doesn't look like the colonists won, not in my opinion. Not with the money that the people got saddled with paying back to British banks. Loyalty ties, and of course Franklin and his Hellfire Club and Ordo Templi Orientis And when I read Pike and Manly P. Hall talking about the pure Luciferian doctrine, harnessing the energies of Lucifer, etc., I realized that when Joseph Smith became a Mason and 7 weeks later changed the endowment to place Freemasonry in the endowment, I couldn't really conceive how that was being revealed from God, as is claimed. And this course is supposed to be unchangeable in the endowment, of course. You can read on the internet many changes that have occurred in the endowment. And the adaptation of, the oath of vengeance and all those sort of things upon the United States after the killing of Joseph and Hiram. Okay. Alright. I'm just going to skip ahead here. I, of course, studied the conspiracies since the 70s and realized it was much deeper than the Council on Foreign Relations. I began to decide that America was more like a British colony when I noticed people were tenants on their own property deeds and realized no one owned their property, at least not the common people, and somebody was lying to us. So, ironically, the doctrine taught in 1 Nephi chapter 13 of the Manifest Destiny and other secret combination thoughts, starting in Moses chapter 5 and then Ether chapter 8 with Ezra Taft Benson and company and the John Birch Society marketing conservatism as a start. But when I saw deeper, I saw that they were just controlled opposition and lying to me about the origins of this combination and of what the origins of what we call a country. I noticed that we were human cattle. I had once revered Ezra and spent time with a friend of his. Alright, I don't think I'm going to read all this stuff, but... So basically we talk about how the church has changed its... The church has changed its stance. It's become politically correct more and more on certain issues. If God is speaking, is God changing his attitude here? Does God feel differently about race, about slavery, about the LGBT issue, not just sending down fire and roasting these people? We had Richard G. Scott saying something sounded kind of like an oxymoron, and when he and Henry B. Eyring went to the Vatican, the Church of the Devil, to participate in a World Conference of Religious Leaders, and I heard Elder Richard G. Scott on the LDS broadcast business between World Report, between conference talks a couple of years ago, saying we need to encourage governments to pass laws protecting the LGBT rights or something while yet protecting families. It seemed like an oxymoron to me, but that's what he said. That's a lot different from endorsing burning people alive in Sodom and Gomorrah, or what's mentioned in Leviticus, where the Israelites are instructed to kill anyone who is gay. How is it the church can change on items? How is it that they can contradict fundamental LDS doctrine as it relates to our exercise of agency in the premortal existence being the qualifying round to place us in the best situation to be in the chosen race, as Israel proclaims it has been since Yahweh was written of in the Old Testament, God's chosen people, and those who are born into the house of Israel in the church being the chosen ones, the noble and great ones, the choice spirits, as they hear in patriarchal blessings, as opposed to those fence sitters who are out doing something else during the war in heaven. Some think they were playing basketball. We still have the same doctrine taught in patriarchal blessings. We just don't hear that you were born Chinese or African if you were less valiant. We don't hear that preached at General Conference anymore. We don't hear the things taught that went along with that same doctrine, which were taught by, especially by people like Mark E. Peterson or Bruce McConkie or Brigham Young. But it all goes together. It goes together with the doctrine of the premortal existence and us obtaining results from our exercise of free agency, just as the gospel of prosperity preaches now. that those who keep the commandments of God best prosper most, as it speaks of in the Book of Mormon. There are many doctrines that don't seem to correlate with the assertion that a perfect and all-knowing and unchanging God guides the church, and especially when we see the changes in order to accommodate political correctness or the economic growth of the church, as it appears to have been in 1978, when the revelation came just about 2 or 3 months before the São Paulo, Brazil temple opened, which would not have been very economically feasible without allowing people of mixed race, including African descent, entering into the temple. The portrayals of the Holy Ghost revealing things to Spencer Kimball and the brethren being all agreed in humility has been contradicted by second-hand renditions of eyewitness accounts to me from people who knew people there. Our comments discuss the use of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, and various other arts of persuasion that people tend to notice, some people notice the brethren using. Now, why is it that they are using hypnotic language and subliminal programming techniques on people in general conference and in other church services? Why are these things employed? Why is it employed in music? Is Jesus really into using coercive persuasion techniques, also known as mind control, on the members of his church? How does that work with the doctrine of free agent? Well, that's an interesting subject. It really is. How honest and straightforward have the leaders been in general conference? What techniques has Gordon B. Hinckley used in his war and peace talk to bring us from the point of the United States attacking and bombing innocent people in Baghdad and throughout Iraq and Afghanistan to believing that they are the Gadianton robbers and engineered the events at the Twin Towers? And of course, let's not mention Building 7 that came straight down like the others did without ever being hit by a plane. In the foregoing videos, we established definite reason to believe that there are ties between the leadership of the LDS Church and those in the military-industrial complex, and that they help promote illegal and immoral wars of mass murder and aggression, which are very profitable for the military-industrial complex. How can it be that God's true prophets could be ignorantly doing such a thing, assisting modern-day Gadiantons to murder and plunder, while calling the victims the Gadiantons themselves, and employing advanced techniques of persuasion known to those who have been trained well in them? Not generally what you would expect from a holy prophet, from a holy God. And who owns the preferred shares of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? We examined corporate governance in publicly traded companies. We did not, however, get to see who owns the shares in privately held corporations. Who owns the shares of LDS Inc.? Who owns the shares of the corporation of the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Who owns the preferred shares and the majority stock in Bonneville International, or many of the other corporations that are held underneath the church's umbrella? How about Intellectual Reserve? How about some of the banking concerns? How about the cattle industry and others? How about the media? Make sure you watch those 2 Secret Combination Book of Mormon videos that I just did, and explore some other issues in the channel. You're going to see a lot of documentation, and I don't think very many people know about corporate governance and the role it plays of essentially replacing our constitutional or representative government that we're led to believe that we have, just as we're led to believe that we're free and all sorts of things that are not exactly the truth. Thanks for liking and subscribing. I'll look forward to hearing your comments.
Then Moroni speaks to us in this day and says, Wherefore the Lord commandeth you, when ye shall see these things come among you, that ye shall awake to a sense of your awful situation, because this secret combination which shall be among you.
What is inferred, it says, among you Gentiles. This is in Ether, chapter 8. So we're specifically told to be expecting a secret society or network of secret societies to be very powerful in taking control of society. And we are warned that we must not allow it to happen. We are given examples, and Nephi prophesies or tells what exactly has happened through revelation with regards to certain events. When he is in, the Nephi in the garden scene, and he tells about how the chief judge was murdered by another member of their secret society. Now, in our day, we're conditioned to call people conspiracy nuts if they even suggest that there could be such a thing. We were told that these secret societies are basically urban legend and have a spin put on things so that we'll think that only some sort of a nutcase would believe in them. Conspiracy theorist is a loaded term now. Of course, the word theory implies that it's just a theory. And so now we're conditioned to believe that anyone who believes anything that would be contrary to what we're fed on the news, especially Fox News, is just a conspiracy nut, some right-wing nut. But that's not what the Book of Mormon says. So what are we told at church? Where is Nephi now when it comes to September 11th and the events that occurred there? There are many intelligent people in the church. What is it that would cause intelligent people to not utilize their God-given ability to think rationally about certain things? What is it that causes people to mentally shut down in terms of their critical thinking skills when it comes to certain things? How are people trained or conditioned to do this? Again, we can look to Scientology, the Moonies, and the Jehovah's Witnesses to actually see good examples of how this is done. And then the obvious question becomes, are we doing this? Are we doing this with regards to what happened with September 11th? What things are we being encouraged to be loyal to and just take on faith and believe that don't make sense if we apply our rational thinking abilities? I recall how easy it was for me to see that the Jehovah's Witnesses' plan of salvation seemed so completely ridiculous with their only 144,000 people that could be saved in their version of the celestial kingdom. Speaking with a JW missionary, I questioned her about this. She assured me that her mother was one of the saved, but that if she did well, she could be saved on earth. And so I said, so families can't be together forever? You do everything right, and you still can't be together with members of your family? How much sense does your plan of salvation make? I was able to use rational thinking. She became uncomfortable, because it was a little rough to defend her belief system, which made no sense. So I had to ask myself, have I done this with my own beliefs in some way? Or are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints doing this in anything? I mean, our plan of salvation makes so much sense in many ways. Yet, are we believing some things without thinking about them with regards to our society? So, those are kind of things that I'm looking at here, and that I'm asking us to actually think about. So, for instance, faith. We have many definitions, or certain definitions of faith, but in other words, it's extolled as a virtue if we just decline to use rational thought about some things that don't seem to make sense. Accepting something on faith is extolled as a virtue. In other words, the more difficult something is to believe, the more unreasonable it is, the more faith it requires. So, the more irrational something is to believe, the greater our virtue is if we actually believe it. Now, think about that. How does that work for manipulating people? Let's say in one of those other churches that just aren't true and use these sort of techniques of coercive persuasion. Let's just pretend it doesn't happen with us. But isn't the principle of faith used that way in other religions? And we have faith in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but somehow everything's okay when it's the Lord's church, when we have the true gospel, the restored gospel. Of course, that's what the Jehovah's Witnesses say. For them that are in the truth, that's what they call it. For us, we have the restored gospel. For them, they're in the truth. What is it with Scientology? What is it with another religion? What do you call it in your religion if you're not LDS, when you're in the truth? Have we noticed how some of those high-control organizations like the Moonies or Scientology or the J-Dubs take all their people's time? They use behavior control techniques, they use information control techniques, and they manage to manipulate belief systems so they don't question their divine leader who has sole access to God's pure revelation. Thank God we're not like them. Thank God we alone have the true gospel. And all those poor, deceived people that think they have the true gospel, well, they're just deceived, and perhaps we can help them. And when applying that to society and how our society is actually run through a secret government, essentially, through the financial means, which we will see, will or have seen evidence of, done by the Corporation Nation film, and the highlights that we're using out of this to show exactly how this takes place in the financial world in the United States. When we've got this in front of our faces, we can't deny it. It's solid evidence. We can't call it theory any longer.
So let's take a look at some of these comprehensive annual financial reports. Let's go back to Delaware. Here on the Sunshine Review, we see the Delaware state budget for 2008 and 2009. Now remember, this is the taxpayer budget. It says, Delaware faced an $84 million budget gap for fiscal year 2009 as of February 2009. But not to worry, Governor Jack Markell will come to the rescue. Under his proposed actions, it says that the governor has proposed an expansion of gambling that would position the state as a Vegas-style destination. Curing of the economy with casinos? In the first year, the sports lottery is estimated to generate $55 million in additional revenue. Additionally, with corporate and income tax increases, program and benefit cuts, and an across-the-board payroll reduction of 8%, Markell told lawmakers his plan would balance next year's budget despite a $751 million revenue hole. Now, before we look at the comprehensive annual financial report, which is the full accounting of all the money that Delaware has,